And they met and decided that they wanted to drive into the heart of the Black community in Chattanooga, set up crosses on what was then called East Ninth Street. It wasn't MLK Boulevard at that time. Set up the crosses, set them ablaze, drive around, because there were social clubs and restaurants all along that strip, right where there's a train trestle there, and a few blocks away from that, I'm not sure what's east, west, or south, a few blocks away from that, closer to downtown, there was a strip of restaurants, restaurants. There was a hotel also I stayed at, and a number of activities. So it was a Saturday night. And they were trying to basically went with the crosses there. The hope was people would come out, look at these crosses because we're in the South, and then they would shoot them. That was planned. That was the plan. Simple as that. So they went and got their wood, and then they drove to Marshall Thrash's house, according to the complaint and the judgment. And Marshall was a hunter, and they got two shotguns. One was a pump action shotgun, which means you have to pull it back and do that.
Yes.
The other was I think it was a breech loading shotgun. You opened it up and you put the bullets in, the cartridges in, snapped it back. Had two shotguns. So little Larry Payne, we called him Little Larry, the short little guy. He's in the back seat. He's got the shotguns back there allegedly. So they drove around East 9th Street, came up, I think it's Douglas. They came down 10th Street, made a turn, and the women were walking down East 9th Street to the corner where the restaurants were. And Miss Jackson, who's still alive, she's the only one of the women still alive. She said recently, when I came back to Chattanooga a few years back, she said, it looked like a ball of fire coming at me. She said it was like broad daylight. It was nighttime. We're talking 6, 7 o'clock at night. It's dark.
Yeah.
She said it was like a ball of fire coming at her. That's what she saw. They shot these 4 women at that time. They went down. They were all injured. Then they drove further up East 9th Street, and Mrs. Crumsey was tending to her garden at the time, bent over. The Klansmen saw her there, and her children, with some of her relatives, were sitting on the porch, I believe, and they shot at Miss Crumsey, but instead of hitting her, they hit glass in a car window, and the glass and some of the pellets shot out from the car. Mrs. Crumsey was bent over, and if you go to where her house was, still there, you can see on the facade of that building pellet holes from the shotgun pellets that hit that building. They're still there 40 years after the incident. And if you look at those holes, those pellet mark indentations, what you will notice is if you stand up full height, those pellets are about the size at the level of your head. So had she been standing, they would have killed her. They would have killed her, no question about it. But she wasn't, luckily for her. Then they drove on. Klansmen were arrested almost immediately. Almost immediately.
Wow. Yeah, so I did get a chance to watch the documentary, and I did see that part. And one other interesting note that I picked up was that these weren't ordinary pellets. These are like they're designed differently, and once they penetrated the body, since they were so small, it was hard to be taken out.
No, it's impossible. They don't take them out. So in terms of, these are shotguns, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a hunter, but when you handle a case, you learn a lot about different kinds of things. So what I learned in this case was that shotgun pellets can be small, and they call those birdshot. Little small pellets, they're the smallest you can get. Then there are bigger pellets called buckshot, and you use buckshot to shoot a deer, a buck. That's what they're using them for. And the buckshot pellets are big. They make a big hole in the animal because you want to take him down. The bird shot is a very small pellet. Again, you're trying to shoot a duck or geese, whatever you're shooting. If you use a buckshot on a duck, you're going to have no duck. You'll just have feathers because it'll blow them right away. So they use bird shot. They didn't want to kill the women. they used buckshot, that would have been murder. They didn't want to do that. They wanted to maim them. That's why they used birdshot. It would penetrate their skin and lodge in their muscles. You can't remove them. They're too small. And these women were elderly. So to
Right.
put one of them, two of them at the time of the trial had over 100 shotgun pellets in her legs. And they would push their way out through your skin and pop out eventually. And that is extremely painful.
Right, right. Especially taking into account, like, as you mentioned, their age. So, in all this pain, no way to relieve that.
Nope.
But now they're determined to get that justice after this incident. So, I know you mentioned the act of suing came about after discovering this other Klan act that came about years before, and that's what made way for you guys to be able to sue them. Now, when did that become an option?
It was, I'd say it like this, but it was the perfect case. It was the perfect case. Why? The women hadn't been killed, right? Many of these Klan violence, the Emmett Till, he wasn't the Klan, but just a bunch of raw racists, allegedly. I got to say that word allegedly because they're threatening to sue everybody these days. I'm like, someone said to me when we were getting ready to make the film, they said, oh, you got to be careful. You may get sued for defamation. I said, defamation? I got a judgment against these people. A jury stood up and said, you violated the law. So I said to this person who was telling me, oh, you might get sued. I said, good. Let them come to New York State, New York City, Harlem, New York, and sue me for suing the Klan and beating them in court. I would welcome that. Well, needless to say, the Klan hasn't come for me yet.
They're not, in the name of Jesus.
Inshallah, God willing. But if they do, we're ready.
So what was that like? I know for the women, it was definitely scary, a bit traumatic. But for you, joining in on that and being there for that, what was that like?
Well, you have to understand that most of the time, I was alone in Chattanooga. It wasn't a team of lawyers down there coming from New York. It was just me most of the time. Luckily, there was a lawyer from the NAACP national office. His name was George Hairston, great guy. He joined into the case. And George was from Chattanooga. So he and I would do the work together. But a lot of the times, at night, I was on my own, and I was staying at a hotel on East 9th Street in the heart of the Black community. Literally, it was walking distance from where the women were shot. Because I want to be in the community. I don't want to be downtown.
Right.
I want to feel, what I always say when I'm handling a case, I want to feel the garment. I want to be I want to see it. I want to feel it. Then I can convey what the women went through by my being there. So at one point, a gun was offered to me. And it was the first night there. And I said, if someone's offering me a weapon, I'm taking it. So I took the weapon. I took it into the hotel. And it was a semi-automatic 38. And the one thing I know about semi-automatics is that there's a great line. If you listen to Biggie Smalls and any of the rappers, there's a great line Biggie has. He says, give those bullets room to breathe. He's talking about a 9mm gun. And what he means is if you squeeze it too quickly, the bullets jam into the gun and you got a brick in your hand now. A 38 is not a big gun. It's not like a 387. It's not a big gun. So knowing that the bullets could jam, I said, okay, it's just me and this hotel. You could walk from the street right to my room. You didn't have to go through the front desk at all. So I'm practicing. So I took the gun and I pulled the slide back and popped a bullet in the chamber. So I had one bullet in the chamber and it's ready. I said, okay, Klansman comes in. I got one to go.
Right.
I'll shoot him center mask and run the hell out of there. That was my plan. So all night long, I'm preparing on what to do. I'm doing this all night long. So I'm nearsighted. Here's the funny part of the story. So I put the gun on my nightstand right next to the bed because I want, if they're coming to the door,
Right.
I want to be able to get that gun. I'm not going to go look for it. I want to grab it and shoot somebody if I have to. Self-defense is a right. So the next morning, I woke up and I said, Randy, I said to myself, I said, you don't need this. You know what could have happened last night to you? You could have, in your nearsightedness, reached for your glasses and knocked the gun over, and it would have gone off. And the headline would have been civil rights lawyer commits suicide. I said, no. So that next morning, I gave the gun back and I said, I don't need this. I'll be all right. And I never saw a gun down there again. But when I was in the South doing anti-Klan work, every time I was in the South doing work with other organizers, there were guns everywhere. I mean, everywhere. I mean, there had to be. And I remember one day we're in North Carolina organizing an anti-Klan rally, and an organizer and I are traveling up and down from Durham to Raleigh to Greensboro. And he puts a 38 semi-automatic on the dashboard and says, if something jumps off, use it. I'm like, what? Now I'm from the city, New York City. You know, isn't that violent? Yeah, we have violence. You got violence. It's America. America's a violent country. We have more guns here than any place else, and we use them. But I wasn't used to weapons like that. I didn't see guns like this. And I was like, wow, this is nuts. People are really going to shoot at us? Yeah. And then one day I was marching in Decatur, Alabama, and we ran across some Klansmen. They were standing there with their Klan outfits, yelling at us with pickaxes and pitchforks. And I'm looking at these clowns. I'm like, it's 1980. What is the matter with you people? Why are you doing this? But they were there. And interestingly, the same Ku Klux Klan statute that we used against the Klan is being used against those insurrectionists who tried to destroy our democracy. It was also, as you saw in the movie, it was also used in Charlottesville when those terrorists, one of them allegedly, killed a woman with her car, drove his car right into the crowd. Yeah. Unite the right, they called it. I call it unite the terrorists. That's what they are.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. So the women did end up winning this settlement, but they did not get, they unfortunately weren't able to receive their full settlement.
That's right.
Which is bittersweet.
It is. Here's the reality of the situation. And we explain, I always do, to every client what the options are going into a case. I said, look, it's likely these Klansmen don't have any money. I mean, they're not exactly wealthy people. So we don't know at the end of the day whether we'll see any money here. Yes. But what I do know is we're going to get an injunction, and the injunction would stop future acts of Klan violence in Chattanooga. And the judge issued that injunction. And since that injunction was issued, to the best of our knowledge, there has not been a single incident of Klan violence, period. And here's the other thing we did. So one of those three defendants, including four, including the organization, had a house that he owned and rented out in Rossville, Georgia, was my recollection. And during the litigation, he sold the house. And we hired lawyers in Georgia to sue him, this defendant, and get that house put back in his name and sold so the women could get the money. Why? It's called a fraudulent conveyance. He sold the house to avoid the judgment. And the court said, nope, put that back in his name, sell the house, give the women whatever money's left over. So they got some money. I'm sorry it wasn't as much as they should have.
Yeah.
But, half a cow's better than none at all. And also the fact that they stood up. I mean, they didn't testify I don't believe they testified in the criminal case. I don't believe so. But they testified, each of them in our case, each of them. And see, I say this, if you just accept brutality, then you're a victim. If you fight back, you're a hero or a shero. And that's what they did. So they fought back, and they got a chance in an open courtroom to look these Klansmen in the face and talk to that jury. I had each of them, when I had the women, I had them step off out of the jury box, out of the witness box, and stand in front of the jury and lift their skirts and dresses up so the jury could see their legs and see what these men did to these women. And we got a judgment, unanimous.
Would you say, from what you knew about the women and speaking to them after the case and speaking to their family members today, even though they never got their full settlement, would you say the fact that this case may lay the foundation to seek justice for incidents like this, would you say that sufficed? Like that was the win?
To us, that's the win, but I think that, we've handled a number of cases in New York, and mostly in New York, where police officers shoot and kill a loved one of a family. And the families will always say this: I don't care how much money I get, it can never bring back my loved one. And the true justice is not getting money. The true justice is putting Klansmen in jail for what they did. Because if we did that, if a Black person walked down the street and just shot people randomly, they'd be in jail for a hell of a long time. But one of the Klansmen who actually shot the women, he got 9 months for trying to shoot 5 women. Seriously? That's not even, that's ridiculous. And he got out early for good behavior. It was crazy talk. So in that sense, true justice never comes from a civil case. True justice comes from criminal cases where people are held accountable and must pay for the crime they committed. But if the system won't respond, won't do what the system is supposed to do, protect each of us from violence, then we have to take the law into our own hands and file these suits to bring these folks to justice. And that's what we did. And I'm proud of the work we did in Chattanooga.
I'm fairly new to the area, so I heard about the story word of mouth before I even knew there was a documentary. And then going there and also speaking to my coworkers or other fellow Chattanoogans, they did not know about the story. Why is that? Like,
it was buried. Malcolm X said, "Don't trust the people who enslaved us to tell our stories." That's what he said. So don't trust the people who ignored the Klan and let them flourish to tell our stories. We have to tell our stories ourselves. And the way this kind of, I'm not sure if you've heard this part of it, but the way this story came about in terms of what's going on right now, I'm sitting in my office. I'm a law professor at Howard Law School at Pace University in New York. I've been there for over 30 years. It's a long time. And I get this phone call. One of my mentors at the law school said, never change your office number because someone might have had that number 20 years ago and they find you. I said, okay, so I won't do that. So literally almost 40 years after we won the case, I get a call from Tiffany Herron. She was a journalism student at UTC in Chattanooga. And she said, I took she's not from Chattanooga. And she said, I took a tour of downtown Chattanooga, of like historic sites. And they brought me to this place and said, this is where the Klan shot these women. She said, I never heard about this. I'm a journalist. I never heard about this. So she did some research, as journalists would do, picked up the phone, found me at Pace Law School, called me up, and I'm not sure how this, I think she came to visit with me in New York before I came to Chattanooga. I think that's right. And she invited me to come back to Chattanooga. She said, would you be willing to come to Chattanooga to talk about this case and its significance? I said, I've been waiting for that opportunity for 40 years. True story. So I came back. And but before that, I met, she came up from Chattanooga, Tiffany, and she brought with her the granddaughter of the owner of the hotel that I stayed at when I was working on the case.
Did they remember you?
She did. She was a child. I remember her as a little child playing behind the counter. It was a family-owned restaurant and hotel. Great place. It's not there any longer. You can see the sign as you go by. The space is still there. And so I came back, and I gave this speech. Miss Jackson was there at the time. And one of the things I said was, there's a statue on a bridge. I've forgotten the name of the bridge now, that memorializes the African-American man who was lynched in Chattanooga after the U.S. Supreme Court said, stop the criminal prosecution, bring the case to us. Well, the sheriff at the time did nothing. Klansmen and other terrorists came in, dragged the black man, dragged him out of the jail and lynched him on a bridge in Chattanooga. Oh, yeah. There's a statue of him and his lawyers and the entry to the bridge right this very day. So I think that's a great way to remember the Terror Act and what these people did to this man. But I said, we need to celebrate not just victims of Klan violence. We need to celebrate those who fought back and won against Klan violence. So I've said this, and I say it all the time. I want a statue for these women. Don't put the statue on MLK Boulevard where they were shot. No. Put the statue in the park right across from the courthouse where we won the victory. I'm not an architect, I'm not a sculptor, but I want something on that area right there. So when you walk into that courthouse, everyone will say, these were the women. These were the women who fought against Klan terror. And we can too. Yeah, I want them remembered. So I don't want to ever have this conversation again with anybody from Chattanooga who'll say to me, I never heard about this. I want this to be such that you can never forget. Because we can't afford to forget. I'm sorry, we can not afford to forget our past, because there's some ugly parts of it, but also the beauty of what we've done in this country, and the beauty of the country, in a sense, is that we went from slavery to freedom. Slavery to unfreedom, because it wasn't freedom yet. But then we struggled to get freedom, to get the right to vote, to own property, to be free. We've struggled mightily, and every other group has taken what we've done and pushed it to another level. Whether it was women, whether it was gays, whether it was the union movement, they all worked based upon what we did. Movements create power, lawyers create laws, and together we can change the face of America. And we did. We did. And we'll do it again. We'll do it again. What I like to say in these moments, I was one of my daughters as a judge here in New York, just got elected a judge in Manhattan.
Oh, congratulations.
We're very proud of her. So she asked me to give a speech during the induction. And there may be 40 judges in the audience right in front of me. They were like right in front of the bench as I'm standing in the courtroom. So I gave the usual speech, about my daughter and how proud we are, and we are. But then I said, I want to talk to you judges right now. I'm talking to you. I said, we're getting ready to go through some difficult days. And that's before the current administration was in office. But I knew what was coming, Project 25. I said, you're the last guard. You're the protectors of our democracy and our freedoms. Because Congress is not going to protect us, given who's moving in there. The executive branch is not going to protect us. Matter of fact, it's the opposite of what they're doing. You have to stand up. That's what I say to judges. What I say to my students and to lawyers is that without us, the judges are nothing. Without us bringing the cases, no justice will be leveled. Right. But more importantly, without the women or the men who are willing to stand up for justice, there'll be no justice for anyone. So these women, when I came to meet with them, they could have said, no, I'm done. We lost the criminal case. These Klansmen got off. I'm finished. I'm washing my hands of this. They said, no, No, you saw in the film, Miss Clumsy said, I got to protect the children. My children could have been shot in that street. We got to stop this nonsense. So everyone has to play a part. Everyone has to stand up. Because if we don't stand up, we're going to be lying down in our graves.
The documentary has been out for almost a year now. And as I've said, it's been forgotten, as you said, it's been forgotten. But why did you guys feel it was important to showcase this story? And you, even, years later, why did you feel like it was important for you to jump on this?
I believe in stories. I think that, as I said earlier, we have to tell our own stories. And there aren't too many of them these days. I mean, we know a lot about the civil rights movement. We know a lot about a lot of things. But you always want to begin at the beginning and talk about the courage of these women. And frankly, the courage of these lawyers, not just me, going south to do this work.
Mm-hmm.
Because the hope is that people, young lawyers and law students, we've shown this film and done lectures at law schools all across the country. We're still doing that they'll be inspired, that they'll say, you know what? I can do that. I can do that. Because if we don't inspire the next generation to show them that it's possible to make change, that it's not impossible, that you can fight back and win, they'll just lay down and be over. And we have to fight back. Because if we don't, we lose everything. And I, for one, I don't want to lose what there's no period in American history that I want to go back to. There's no period.
Yeah.
None. Because every period in American history where we're involved, where our voices were heard, are periods of incredible violence against us and terrorism. Every period. But at the same time, those periods of violence are periods of resistance. And the resistance is growing. It's growing.
The 56th NAACP Image Awards you guys have nominated, and the film qualifies for the 97th Academy Awards.
We didn't make the cut, but we were qualified, and I'm very proud of that.
That's big. The more that it's getting around word of mouth, and the more that you guys are having the screenings, it will definitely be. But whether or not it wins those awards, this is an award. This is an honor right here, just to even tell the story and have this film, this project in our community and beyond. So it's amazing. I love it. I thank you for being a part of it and bringing it to the forefront.
Thank you for having me.